first thing that we're going to be looking at is imperialism. Now, imperialism, this refers to a country's overarching power to undermine another race or country. So essentially having control and gaining control over other races or other countries. Now, imperialism is asserted early in this text with the firepower of the British. So essentially the scene where the British shore and Surgeon Waymark fires his gun into the native's shield. That to me really accentuates the idea that the British are in charge and that the British are taking over. Now, Rooke was one of the only characters to see past these differences. He's the one that kind of really saw the natives as humans, as people. Gardner did as well, but the others never really grasped this concept. Racism in the text, whether you want to call it racism or not, if you want to call it British superiority, is probably a more technical way to put it. Essentially, this is the British asserting their dominance over the Cadigal people. So despite being told that they were to create relationships with the natives, there was this entitled sense that the British were superior to the Cadigal people. And thus they had really harmful relationships and they weren't able to have that successful relationship built between the British and the natives. As I said before, Rooke and Gardner are two examples that you can use when we talk about the poor treatment of the natives. These two men dispute the fact that the natives should not be treated in the way that they were being treated. You could also contrast the way that Rooke and Gardner treat the natives with the way that Brugden treats the natives. So Brugden was the gameskeeper. He went out and shot at the native. He does end up being killed by them later in the text, which I think is probably a bit of justice of their own. But we can definitely see here at least 3 different characters and the way that they think in relation to the text. Now, when it comes to essay planning, you need evidence. I've tried to make it as streamlined for you as possible by providing supporting evidence on the right-hand side. So these are specific examples that you can talk about in an essay. On the left are also a series of quotes that you can use and break down into your essays. So a lot of what we've done over this term is collect quotes. So your OneNote has quotes in it. The videos online have quotes in it. There are quotes in the booklets that I gave you to prep for essay writing. So you shouldn't really have to be flicking back through your novel looking for quotes. There's been a lot of them. So in terms of supporting evidence, what are some of the things that we can talk about when it comes to British superiority in the text? So example number 1 you can talk. So Surgeon Waymark asserts dominance by firing his weapon at the shield of an Indigenous man. The symbol of the gun and the shield highlight the power of the British and the helplessness of the natives. Another example of British superiority, so the kidnapping of the natives. So this highlights the thoughts of superiority of the British, who feel the best way to teach the natives and the best way to learn from the natives is to remove the natives from their home environment and force them into discourse with the British. So this is the example that we're talking about with Gardner. Gardner was the one who was in charge of the mission to find and kidnap the natives and bring them back to camp so they could essentially be studied, almost like an animal or a plant. And there was no real consideration that these were people they were taking their home. Another example are whether young girls are attacked by white men. It signifies the disrespect for men towards the Indigenous women. Brooke was obviously approached by the native girls to act about this, but he couldn't, because really there was that sense of the white men were entitled to do whatever they would like to do because they did not see them as women or as people, but as obviously items or things that they could. What we're going to be doing today, the activities linked to the information I'm providing you, is that you will have to draw an essay plan. Now, you can draw these on a piece of paper and then take a photo of them and embed them in your OneNote, or you can type them up into your OneNote if that helps. But essentially, this is the best way to draw an essay plan. So in the white space at the top, I would write the question. Then I would write out my contention. So what is my stance on the essay question? I would then write what my idea is for paragraph 1 on the left, and then underneath I'd dot point some examples of quotes that I would be using in that paragraph. Then moving over, I would write what I'm going to write about in paragraph 2, and then I'd dot point my examples and quotes again, paragraph 2, and then I would, on the far right, put my idea for paragraph 3, and then the examples I'm going to use. You really should be trying to use 2 events, 2 examples in every paragraph to show your knowledge of the text. And in terms of quotes, we're looking for at least 5 to 8 quotes per paragraph, and these can be spatterings of up to 1 word, maybe about 5 to 6 word quotes. Essays without quotes are heavily penalised. I know that you've been told that in previous years. However, we do know that at year 12, there's no excuse for not having quotes. You have to use them. I've given them all to you from the text. So it's just a matter of flicking to those notes, finding quotes that are helpful, and then popping them back in. Now, in the essay booklets that I provided you at the end of the term, I gave you a full list of quotes, and they're actually organised by event. So if there's a particular event that you want to talk about, you can just flick to the quote section, open it up, go to that event, and then right there are all the quotes from that event, and you can use them. I've also included a copy of this on your OneNote under essay help. So I know it's annoying to go and look them up, but at the same time, you're not having to flick through your novel looking for them yourselves. Now, this was the practice essay that we did for the holiday homework. So I'm not necessarily going to get you to write this plan. However, this is how you would set the plan up. Idea 1 with example 1 and example 2. Idea 2 with 2 examples. Idea 3 and 2 examples. And I posted a screenshot of what I planned for the holiday homework essay on our intranet page. So feel free, if you don't want to gap in your OneNote, to either include your own plan for that essay or to include my plan for that essay as a little bit of a guide. This is the last theme that we're going to talk about today. And you'll be, at the end of this, expected to write an essay plan on violence. Now, in terms of violence in the text, Brooke must systematically and rationally deal with violence. Brooke initially does not use a human lens to consider violence. Not that Rook's not human, but Rook is a different kind of man at the beginning of the text. He's got a mathematical brain, and as such, when he sees violence early on in his life, he's able to cope with it quite well and isn't really badly affected. Now, later in the text, Brooke really struggles to participate in violent acts. He's developed compassion, and And the fact is that he's chosen to rejoin the Marines as an astronomer. So the violence he sees in New South Wales greatly affects him where it didn't earlier in his life. Some examples of violence that you can talk about in the text. So there's the flogging of the prisoner for stealing. We looked at this with our guided passage analysis the other day. So this inhumane act is observed by Rook because these are the British values. And Warungan obviously thinks differently about this. There was also an event earlier in the text where a boy at Rook's school, Lancelot Percival, tells Rook that slavery is necessary. He highlights the dominance of one race over another, even if you have to use force. So that could be something from Rook's early life. Also, Rook witnesses the hanging of a lieutenant for disobedience. Rook obviously doesn't like what's happening when he sees that, but he in no way wants to intervene or act out about it. This is in great contrast to Rook in his later life, and something that you could also talk about is obviously the beheadings of the natives and the fact that Rook is really disgusted by this, and he does not want to be part of that evil act. Even though it didn't actually happen, the idea of beheading the natives was just abhorrent to Rook. So what you're going to do today, and this is your ticket out of the door, you're going to plan for this essay topic. In the lieutenant, few characters possess freedom and can exercise free will without fear of the consequences. So it is loosely related to violence, but it's also related to morality and duty. So before I let you go, let's go over a couple of ideas as to what we can talk about. I'll give you about a minute of thinking time, and then we'll discuss together.